All right, welcome back. In this video, we're going to start scripting our character. So if you haven't seen the previous videos, make sure you go see that. I think this is like video 9 already. So if you're just watching this, make sure you go watch the previous videos to catch up to where we are now. We're going to go ahead and start creating the player controller script. And before we do that, you just need to understand that we're utilizing this standard assets folder right here. Inside the standard assets folder, if you go to the cross-platform input, we'll be using, inside the prefabs, we'll be using this mobile tilt controller to be able to make life a lot easier for us to move the character. So if you don't have that, you can go here to assets and you can import the cross-platform input here. And if once you have that, you go ahead and take this mobile tilt controller and drag it into the scene. Next, what we want to do is go here to our assets folder. We're going to go to scripts and we're going to right click on that, create, and we're going to create a C# script. We're going to call that player controller and press enter. So I'm going to go down here and double click on this player controller to open it up inside of Visual Studio 2017. If you don't have Visual Studio 2017, it'll open it up in Mono Develop. This right here will pop up, and the first thing we're going to do is capture two components we need. We need the transform, and then we need the rigid body control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two variables, two private variables that actually grab the transform, and then I'm going to name this this transform. I'm going to make it equals null. And then I'm going to need a rigid body 2D, and that's going to be this. That's going to equals null. Now, I don't want to get this in the start. What I want to do is I want to activate these or capture these inside of the awake function. And that is public. We'll say this transform equals get component, and the component we want is going to be the transform of this object. And then we're going to call upon, we're going to get this body 2D by doing the same thing, get component, and the component we want is the rigid body 2D. So if it's not already clear, basically what this does is it takes these components inside the scene and it binds it to these two variables here, so that way we can use it inside of our code. The other thing we need to do is change our update to fixed update, because what we're dealing with here is a rigid body, and all the physics component inside of Unity has to be dealt with inside of the fixed update, not necessarily the update. So it's in this area that we're going to be doing all of our capturing the movement and the left and right buttons and the jumps and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you remember that cross-platform prefab we put on the stage, we're going to go ahead and access that using Unity's standard assets inside of the code. So we're going to type Unity standard assets down here, and then we're going to put cross-platform because we're going to need access to that for our movement. And the next thing I'm going to need is another variable to kind of keep track of the maximum speed of the player. So public float max speed f. Because we're going to be reading input from the character left and right, up and down, we're going to do one at a time. But we're going to use this cross-platform's properties to be able to get the horizontal movement and the left movement of the character. So down here we're going to go ahead and type, we're going to create a variable, a float, and it's going to be the horizontal axis that we're dealing with here. And I can call the cross-platform manager. I'm going to get that axis, and then I'm going to type horizontal. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, this should work, and we need to set this up on the character itself. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to save all of my open files in my player controller. We'll go back here to Unity, and I'm going to take this player controller and drag it on to the player itself. Now what we'll be able to do is go here and test this information to see if it actually works. We can actually test this horizontal right here by sending this out to the debug. So if I were to say debug.log, and then I would put the HORZ here. Now what happened when I run this, and this actually is going to be printed out inside of the debug window. I'll be able to see what's happening when I'm utilizing that horizontal. And then actually I can just make sure it's working also. So right now if you look here, here's the game window. I'm going to press play. I've already added the script to the player. And when I press play, I'm going to go to the console window, and you'll notice here that it's all zeros here. But because this is attached to the player, if I hit the left arrow key, I'm going to hold the left arrow down. Now if I go down here all the way at the bottom, you'll see how it's showing 1. And if I hit the, that's the right arrow. And if I hit the left arrow, it says -1. And when I'm not pressing anything, it shows 0. So it's already giving us some input. So we know that the left arrow is -1, the right arrow is 1, and not holding anything is 0. We'll be able to use that for our movement. From this point on, this is pretty much how we're going to be moving our character in the horizontal direction and also in the upper direction, but we're doing one direction at a time. So make sure you get your project working at this point, and we'll go ahead and continue coding in the next video. I'll see you guys then.